It's season 7. Steven? 7?
Siete.
All right, everyone. Hello and welcome to the season 7 premiere of Allegedly Astrology. Can't believe we're saying that. And if you're new here or just need a reminder, each week we break down the astrology that happened during some of the biggest scandals and events in history.
And thanks so much to everyone for listening to our show. If you would like to support us even more, you can leave a 5-star review and subscribe on whatever podcast platform you listen on.
And if you do leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and DM us a screenshot of your review, we'll make you a custom meme of your Big 3 and send you a quick write-up about it. It's really cute.
We also have a very cool exclusive Patreon, so if you want more awesome astrology content year-round, join us there at patreon.com/allegedlyastrology.
And that cool content also involves Dana's out-of-pocket predictions for things in pop culture, such as just the Irish resurgence.
Irish culture and P. Diddy are 2 of my accurate predictions, as well as umbrella dresses and, I don't know, Sesame Street, maybe?
Oh, no, it was Charlie Brown.
Charlie Brown.
I think I
Snoopy.
predicted both.
Oh, wow, both. Okay. So with that, Dana, what are we talking about today?
Today we're talking about Gypsy Rose Blanchard.
And this was a request from loyal listener and patron, Annalicia. So if you want to be like her, you could always DM or email us if you have any episode topics, and we'll add it to our huge list and maybe one day cover it.
Yes. We love hearing from you guys.
Truly.
So DM us. And if you don't know anything about Gypsy Rose and her very interesting and upsetting story, you're going to want to know that there's a trigger warning for abuse in this episode. So if you're not into that, skip this one. We'll have some fun ones this season. Don't worry. Gypsy Rose Blanchard was recently released early from prison after serving 8 years for the murder of her abusive mother, Dee Dee. And Dee Dee controlled many aspects of Gypsy's life. She made her undergo years of intense medical treatments that she never needed. And given the very sensational aspects of Gypsy's childhood, she gained widespread media attention, and her arrest and trial made headlines around the world. So her case also has been documented in limited series like Hulu's The Act and HBO's Mommy, Dead and Dearest. So let's learn more about Gypsy and her astrology.
So Gypsy, which I learned this story because I watched Mommy, Dead and Dearest when it first came out.
Same.
And
I think we watched that at our old apartment.
Yeah, it's been out for a while, but I was like, holy shit. So Gypsy was born to Claudine Dee Dee Blanchard and Rod Blanchard, and her parents met when Dee Dee was 24 and Rod was 17. Which I feel like that is illegal.
Dee Dee likes power.
Yeah.
Yikes.
So they dated for a few months, and then Dee Dee got pregnant, and then Rod was like, I probably should marry her because she is pregnant. So they did. But then basically a year later, when he was 18, he woke up and was like, this was a horrible decision. So they got divorced. And yeah.
Yeah, but Gypsy Rose was born. She was healthy at birth. But around 3 months old, Dee Dee started saying that Gypsy had sleep apnea and would stop breathing in the middle of the night. And this kicked off Dee Dee taking Gypsy to the hospital.
And the doctors really couldn't find anything wrong, but Dee Dee was like, I know that there is something wrong with my baby. And this kind of kicked off Dee Dee saying Gypsy was sick. Dee Dee started saying Gypsy had a wide array of health issues like muscular dystrophy and that she needed a walker. She also said she had chromosomal defects, epilepsy, severe asthma, sleep apnea, eye problems. And then when she was around 7 or 8 years old, Gypsy was involved in a minor motorcycle accident with her grandfather, and she got a small knee cut. But after that, Dee Dee was like, oh, you can't walk. You just need a wheelchair.
Oh, my God. And despite being sick, people who met Gypsy Rose were charmed by her 4'11" height, her toothless mouth, her large glasses, high childlike voice, and it reinforced the perception that she had all the problems that her mother claimed that she had. And Dee Dee would often remind people that her daughter had brain damage, which, anyway, there's so much, but there's a whole episode long now, so I'll keep my mouth shut until then. And she claimed she had to be homeschooled because she'd never be able to keep up with other kids, and that Gypsy had the mind of a child of age 7.
Yeah, so she's just really setting it up for everyone to be like, Gypsy, whatever Gypsy says is going to be incorrect because she has all of these problems. She has the mind of a 7-year-old.
I was right about so many things when I was 7.
So Gypsy kind of remained in this childlike state for many years. You know, she loved princess outfits and dressing up, and she wore a bunch of wigs because she had no hair. She had a shaved head. And she always wore this curly blonde Cinderella wig, and dressed together was a common photo that she was seen in.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah. So Dana, like, what's her big 3? What's happening?
Okay, she was born on July 27th, 1991 at 11:12 a.m. in Raceland, Louisiana, and she has a Leo sun, an Aquarius moon, and a Libra rising. So she was born on a lunar eclipse in Aquarius, which indicates extreme circumstances in life. If anyone who's born on an eclipse will agree with that. And the eclipse is in her natal 5th house of children. And it's ruled by and conjunct her Saturn in Aquarius, which also rules her 4th house of parents. And the moon is the mother. Saturn is restrictions and punishments and abandonment. She was apparently abandoned by her father, and she had a restrictive mother, to say the least. And just a little fact is that JonBenet Ramsey was also born on a lunar eclipse in Aquarius a year earlier, and we have an episode on her from season 1 if you want to go back and check that out.
Oh, wow.
And
throwback.
Right? And so her Leo sun is in her 11th house, and the sun in Leo craves love, attention, and affection, if not the spotlight. And in the 11th house, it gives an audience or public adoration, especially because it's co-present with Jupiter in Leo, and Jupiter functions best in the 11th house. And Leo suns want love and to be loved, but Saturn is conjunct the moon and opposite her sun, which is rejecting her bids for affection. And her sun is also conjunct Chiron, which indicates sadness, wounding, feeling like there is something wrong with her, or something about that being part of her identity. Also, childlikeness can definitely be sort of related to Leo placements. Sometimes Leo placements can sort of get an arrested development at the last time they were affirmed by one of their parents. And someone who I always think of when I remember that is Tinsley Mortimer, who's a very accomplished person, but she sort of has a childlikeness about her. And she's a Leo.
Yeah.
And then we get to her Libra rising. So she's ruled by Venus in Virgo in her 12th house, which is stationed retrograde 4 days after she was born. And Libra risings want peace and connection, and often learn the importance of keeping up appearances in childhood. Gypsy's rising is ruled by her Venus in Virgo in her 12th house. And Virgo is a sign of health, and Venus is in fall in Virgo because Venus is love, and Virgos like to pick things apart. So her Venus is also conjunct Mars, which is the planet of surgery, which is especially strategic in Virgo. Like, Virgo placements are definitely placements of physicians. So that's Virgo. Mars is very surgeon. Both are ruled by Mercury, and her Mercury is also in Virgo, where it's domicile and exalted. And Mercury in Virgo is skilled for being able to carry out plans. And these planets are in her 12th house of hospitals and secrets, both of which are so integral to her story, right?
Damn.
And also, this suggests that she might have a childlikeness and not have been afforded enough experience, but she's strategic and she's definitely smart and capable. And so hopefully, well wishes. And then she has North Node conjunct Neptune and Uranus in her 4th house in Capricorn. And so when planets are conjunct the North Node, their gravity increases. Neptune is deception and Uranus is subversion. And like I said before, the 4th house is your parents. It's also home, early childhood programming, and private matters. So all of these things, she had a very strange childhood, and she was deceived by her parents, her mother.
Wow.
And the midheaven and south node are in Cancer, ruled by her moon, which is conjunct Saturn in Aquarius. And the moon, or the midheaven, is our legacy. Cancer is the sign of the mother. The south node shows what gets phased out. And the moon conjunct Saturn can show a strict mother, or a mother who is hard to know, hard to please. Saturn is also death. And of course, she's famous for murdering her mother. So imagine my...
Literally, if your midheaven is your legacy, that is her whole legacy, is murdering her mother.
Thus far.
Thus far.
I believe she might even surprise us more.
Wow.
Also,
oh boy.
Pluto stationed retrograde 1 day after she was born. And when a planet stations retrograde or direct on or within a week of before or after a person is born, the significations of that planet will be emphasized in a person's life. And Pluto is a planet of power and perversion. It's also associated with poison and toxicity. And it's in Gypsy's 2nd house, which relates to food and nourishment. but I won't say any more spoilers.
Wow.
Her chart, again, is very literal, especially Saturn conjunct the moon.
Right?
And the North Node conjunct Neptune. It is just very
Isolated.
Yeah.
Also, I mean this in truly a nice way, but I feel like Aquarius moons are definitely extremely weird. And
Unique.
it's not a bad thing. They are very unique, but I feel like as we get into this episode, we'll see if you have been following Gypsy on Instagram.
Well,
she lived a very weird life, but she definitely has a lot of weirdness to her. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but
I feel like the thing about Aquarius moons is they rationalize like all their emotions, but they also need time to be alone. They need time to disconnect from everyone. And just that's their way of getting the emotional nourishment they need, is to be away from other people, which is interesting because it's in the sign of the collective.
Yeah. But also, I think it's sort of my favorite thing about Aquarius placements is that they know they're not special, which I think sounds rude, but you just know that you're not better than anyone else. So you become your own person in that way, So it's probably like to collect, like to just even the fact that you're having emotions and you're like, but I'm not special enough to have these emotions. So you have to like do it in the dark.
Wait, something too that we'll get into that I'm thinking of that's interesting too, that she has this Aquarius moon, is a lot of her friendships that she was able to make on her own outside of her mother came from the internet.
Oh.
And she also was super into cosplay, which I feel like I also have Aquarius in the 5th house. I feel like a lot of my interests are fucking bizarre. And I feel like her loving cosplay and dressing up is so...
If someone had a gun
Aquarius
to my head and they said, which one of your friends knew about Gypsy Rose first? I'd be like, Sarah. It was Sarah.
Oh my God. All right, so let's move on to Gypsy's mother, Dee Dee. Obviously, a big player in this story. So Dee Dee was a large, friendly-looking woman. She dressed in bright, cheerful colors. She had curly brown hair that she liked to hold back with ribbons. People who knew her remember her as being generous with her time, and if she could be generous with money, she could make friends quickly, and those people were really devoted and protective of her. And Dee Dee didn't have a job, but she spent her time as Gypsy's full-time caregiver.
Dee Dee, though, did have a dark side. After some time, she had gotten in trouble with the law, usually for small misdemeanors like writing bad checks. She also stole money from her family. So she really had this penchant for lying. And eventually Dee Dee simply just moved away from her family and her ex-husband 2 hours north. And she was pretty close to New Orleans. And, she just took Gypsy away from everyone. So really isolated them.
So despite being far away, Gypsy's dad, Rod, and his girlfriend, Christy, spoke to Gypsy a lot. They always planned to visit, but for one reason or another, it would never work out. Rod also sent $1,200 a month in child support to a New Orleans bank account for Dee Dee to take care of Gypsy.
And then while this is going on, Hurricane Katrina happened and Dee Dee and Gypsy's home was destroyed. And this, in the local community, they got some attention because the story of a single mother with a severely disabled daughter had to flee Hurricane Katrina's devastation. So the media really flocked to them. And because of that attention, Habitat for Humanity eventually built them a house in Missouri, which was where they located after the hurricane. So besides the house, Dee Dee and Gypsy got donations and gifts from charities and community members. They got to go to Disney World for free. Gypsy even got to meet country singer Miranda Lambert through Make-A-Wish Foundation.
Is there a photo of that? I need that photo.
God, I bet
I'm
Miranda's
sure there is.
Scrubbing that shit from the internet. But Gypsy, was always with Dee Dee. The neighbors saw them as this cute, sweet pair. They also were really, respecting and really admired Dee Dee's dedication to her sick child. Someone said, here was this poor sick child who was being taken care of by this wonderful patient mother who only wanted the best for everybody. So, Dee Dee really had the wool over everyone's eyes. So what was the synastry like between Dee Dee and Gypsy?
Dee Dee was born on May 3rd, 1967 in Chack Bay, Louisiana, and we don't know what time she was born, but she has a Taurus sun and a Pisces moon, and she was born between eclipses during eclipse season. So they're both eclipse babies. So astrology runs in
Yikes.
families, and eclipses, again, are extreme life circumstances.
What do you mean by astrology runs in families?
Certain placements will just run in families. I have the same sun and Mars as my mother, and the same sun and Saturn as my dad, and the same moon and Mars as my mom. So you might have the same placements. You also might have the same modality. My grandma has a fire moon, and so do almost all of the women in my family. They have fire, and there are a few Taurus moons. And yes, they are more calm than us.
Pray for Dana's family.
So that's just like, I've, of course, know my family the best, but those placements will run. So it could be by modality, or it could be by element, of course. And they both were born during fixed sign eclipses. So Dee Dee was born before Taurus solar eclipse, after a Scorpio lunar eclipse. And so fixed sign eclipses can be particularly unrelenting. So Dee Dee has Mars retrograde in Libra in Gypsy's first house. And Mars is the planet of war, aggression, and surgery. And Dee Dee made Gypsy get unnecessary surgeries, I think. And Mars retrograde makes the planet's energies especially intense, and can also subvert the agenda of whatever sign it's in and take it to its logical extreme. And Libra is, of course, a sign of maintaining relationships, which can skew codependent at times. And Dee Dee made Gypsy so reliant on her to even meet her basic needs, right? And also Dee Dee received of course, you guys just said, the recognition of being like such a good caretaker. That's one possible manifestation of Mars retrograde in Libra. So Dee Dee's Mars retrograde in Libra also squares Gypsy's nodal axis in her 4th and 10th house. And so when a planet squares the nodal axis, it's like being stuck between a rock and a hard place. It's like, can I live? Energy. You really have to prove that you want to get something done. And Dee Dee's Saturn in Aries is conjunct Gypsy's descendant. So Saturn is a planet of obstacles, and the 7th house is enemies and opponents. And Dee Dee's Saturn also squares Gypsy's midheaven IC axis, which prevents Gypsy from fulfilling her destiny or even living a public life with Dee Dee around. And Dee Dee's Sun, Mercury, and North Node are all in Taurus in Gypsy's 8th house of death and secrets, and also inheritances, which can be both fiscal, material, or even health-related. And so 8th house synastry is all about trust. And this makes the 8th house person, who is Gypsy in this case, susceptible to exploitation by the planet person. And I also think this sort of synastry can be related to Schadenfreude. And of course, Munchausen's by proxy is kind of a manifestation of Schadenfreude. I mean, I would argue that as an armchair psychologist. And
if you don't know what Schadenfreude is, it's kind of just taking pleasure off of, or taking advantage of someone's misfortune.
Yeah. And anyway, Dee Dee has Uranus also conjunct Pluto in Gypsy's 12th house of hospitals, and Uranus is diversions and Pluto is perversions. And so this shows Dee Dee's power to keep Gypsy both in hospitals and keep her ignorant around the truths of her own health.
Interesting. I mean, there's something interesting about Dee Dee's moon being in Gypsy's 6th house of health, like the mom in her 6th house of health and everyday routines.
Wow.
Especially
like
Pisces. You never get clarity with Pisces.
Yeah.
Yes. You can get a lot of
unclear
existential answers, but never clarity.
Yeah. And then obviously all the 8th house stuff, like all the secrets and Pluto
Control.
on her Mars. I know Pluto's generational and everything, but
hey, I believe in Pluto as I agree with you.
Yeah.
Pluto synastry is real, especially between parents.
Yeah. Yeah. Their like dynamic is pretty interesting. But though Dee Dee kept Gypsy pretty locked down, Gypsy was able to create her own Facebook account and started making friends. Again, this to me is very her moon in Aquarius.
Yes. Aquarius moons love to be online.
Yes. And then she started going on Christian dating sites and meeting guys online there. And one of those guys was Nicholas Gojon, who became her boyfriend.
Around what age was she during this time?
Okay, so that's a hard thing because she didn't really know what her real age was for a while because her mom had changed her birth certificate.
Oh my God.
But I think she probably was like 16. I don't know.
So like a late teenager, early 20s potentially, but we don't know for sure.
Yeah.
I think her being born on an eclipse is the best guarantee that we definitely have her real birth time now, you know?
Yeah, no, the birth time that we have is right, but she didn't know how old she
That's
was
wild.
for like a really long time.
When she was actually like on these
Gosh, I
dating
wonder how
sites
that's
and stuff.
litigated if you think you're a minor and you have good reason to, but you're actually of age.
Yeah, these
But
aren't
you're
the
not.
correct ages, but I feel like when she was actually 18, because at one point her dad called her to say happy 18th birthday, but
She's
she
like, "I'm
thought she was
11."
like 14 or something. Yeah.
What if-
Whoa.
And her mom like was like, don't tell her she's 18.
Whoa. That's
Yeah.
so
She was like,
messed up.
okay.
I mean, I'm going to say that a million times this episode of just everything's messed up. But
Yeah.
Gypsy and Nick talked a lot on Facebook, and Gypsy told Nick how her mom was the worst. And after some time talking, Nick and Gypsy decided to conspire to kill Dee Dee so Gypsy could be free of her mother. That's a real summary, but
yeah, a lot of things happened.
a lot of things happened in that time, but alas.
Yeah, we just got to the juicy part right away. So Nick traveled to Missouri to meet Gypsy, and then he waited outside of Gypsy's house until Gypsy gave him a signal that Dee Dee was asleep, and then Nick went into their home.
After Dee Dee fell asleep, Nick went into the house and killed Dee Dee while Gypsy hid in the bathroom. Wow, how did he do it?
Those are 12th house placements.
stabbed
She's a
her.
12th house. Her ruler's in the 12th house. She's like, I'll hide in here while you kill my mom.
Yeah.
He stabbed her?
Yeah, he stabbed her a bunch of times.
Damn.
Yeah,
Whew.
I didn't want to get all the gory details, but yeah, it was a lot. And then things got weirder because on the last day of June, Dee Dee's Facebook account posted an update that said, the bitch is dead. And everybody was like, what? Because Dee Dee's friends were like, what is happening? This was a place that Dee Dee and Gypsy would post updates about Gypsy's health and treatment. So for this to come out was very out of pocket. And then Dee Dee's friends were obviously alarmed. They became even more alarmed when they couldn't get in contact with Dee Dee. So they called the police, who eventually found Dee Dee's body in her home. So what was going on the day that Dee Dee died?
She was murdered on June 9th, 2015, and the body was found on June 14th, 2015.
The day that
Both.
Dee Dee died.
Oh my God.
I like that song. So on June 9th, it was the last quarter moon in Pisces, conjunct Chiron. So the sun,
Well.
the chicken has come to roost. So the sun is in Gemini, conjunct Mars. The moon is in Pisces, conjunct Chiron. And if you remember, Dee Dee had a Pisces moon. So she was murdered on her last lunar return. Also,
Damn.
last quarter moons close out a chapter in one's life, and Chiron is a comet that relates to wounding. So this was, again, literal astrology. The last quarter moon, of course, is also square Mars and Gemini, which is conjunct the sun, and Mars is action. Gemini is chaos. Also, it's ideas. It's real. It's, ideas that you're going to get them done. Sometimes without even thinking.
Also stabby. Mars is real stabby.
Oh, yeah. Mars is stabbing. And the moon was conjunct the south node in Aries the following day, which reveals unpredictable endings whenever the moon is with either node. If you're scheduling anything and you know how you want it to end, don't schedule it if you have any control over the schedule with the moon near the node.
And it's in Gypsy's 7th house.
Oh, bye.
Enemies.
Sayonara.
Yeah.
On June 11th, Mercury stationed direct in Gemini. And so this means that Gypsy and her boyfriend were enacting a plan and that there were many facts yet to be revealed that would soon come to light as Mercury traversed the degrees that it retrograded over. And then on June 12th, Neptune stationed retrograde in Pisces. And this relates to lies and deception, as well as mass confusion and psychic harm. And on June 14th, there was a Mars Cazimi in Gemini, and Saturn retrograded back into Scorpio. So the Mars Cazimi in Gemini brings clarity, and Saturn in Scorpio is ruled by the Cazimi Mars in Gemini. So Saturn is death and decay, especially in Scorpio, as that sign also has those significations. It's also the sign of the detective. And Saturn is both retrograde and in the final degree of Scorpio, ruled by Mars conjunct the sun. And Gemini, that's such finding a dead body, the clarity of a Cazimi, and Mars and Saturn together is like, okay, we found this dead body. Especially Gemini and Scorpio, the two most maligned signs on the internet. And then just with a glance over of Gypsy's transits, she was in a 12th house Virgo year, and the 12th house is dreaded and planets here are neglected. The 12th house themes also include suffering, weakness, imprisonment and isolation, loss, and hospitals. And then it was also her Jupiter return, though. So this is freedom, liberation, and change.
Whoa.
Right? And the eclipses that year were happening on the Virgo Pisces axis and the Aries Libra axis. And so whenever something travels from the 12th house to the first, it's made conscious, and the first house can be about autonomy. So she sort of organized this thing, and all of a sudden the eclipse is happening at the same time in her 12th and first. That's like realizing that you're not sick, and your reality is sort of just this like imposition.
You can be independent.
Your health was never bad.
Wow.
Especially in Virgo. And then also her progressed moon was in Capricorn in her 4th house. The moon is in detriment in Capricorn. It's also, the moon is the mother, and the 4th house is the home of the parents. And so this is a big ending. Finally, also just one note about Dee Dee. The South Node was conjunct her natal Saturn in Aries when she was killed. And so Saturn is the Grim Reaper and the South Node is ending. So in this case, this was the end of her life.
Ta-da! We'll get to more of everything that came out after this. But at the time, Gypsy was missing, so everyone was freaking out that they needed to find her. But they didn't have to look for long because a friend told them about Gypsy's secret boyfriend, Nick.
Yes. And Gypsy's friend showed the police the Facebook messages that Nick and Gypsy had been exchanging. And, they wrote Nick's name down because they're like, this is a guy we have to look at. The police also put a trace on the Facebook post that Dee Dee's account made, that like the bitch is dead one. And the IP address was registered to Nick. So they were like, I guess we're going to Wisconsin because he lives in Big Bend, Wisconsin.
Yeah. And Nick quickly surrendered, and Gypsy was with him, and she was unharmed and in excellent health. And everyone, they thought that they were searching for a severely disabled woman. And so they couldn't help notice something was off with Gypsy. They were like, wait, you can walk? You don't need medicine? Your hair is growing? There were a lot of questions, but the two were taken in and questioned about Dee Dee's death.
And during this questioning is when a lot of unsettling information about Gypsy and Dee Dee started to become revealed. So for starters, Dee Dee seems to have at least forged a copy of Gypsy Rose's birth certificate. So she changed her birth date to 1995 to bolster claims that she was still a teenager. Gypsy had later said in an interview that for 14 years, she was unsure of her real age, which we already kind of touched on.
Poor Gypsy, indeed. And it only gets worse because Dee Dee subjected Gypsy to unnecessary medical treatments and convinced her daughter and others, including doctors, that she had tons of illnesses that she didn't actually have. She also forced Gypsy to use a wheelchair and an oxygen tank, neither of which she needed. She shaved Gypsy's head and forced her to eat through a feeding tube.
And, it has been argued that Dee Dee had Munchausen syndrome by proxy, which is a psychological disorder where a caretaker makes someone, typically their child, ill or creates the illusion of them being ill so they could receive attention.
Beyond the unnecessary medical treatments, which is a form of torture in itself, Dee Dee also physically abused Gypsy as a way to control her, sometimes hitting her with an open hand or a coat hanger.
And that wasn't the only realization. All this stuff is coming out and everybody was like, wow, what is happening? But then the biggest wow, too, was when it became clear that Gypsy had played a role in her mother's death because Gypsy had asked Nick to kill Dee Dee for her.
Right. And so Gypsy was charged with the killing of her mother, but the county prosecutor described the case as extraordinary and unusual, which is true. So he did not pursue a first-degree murder charge against her because he took into the account this long suffering she had experienced from her mother.
So Gypsy made a deal with the prosecutor, and because of that, she was convicted of second-degree murder, which carried a much lighter sentence. She was sentenced to 10 years in prison, but her boyfriend at the time, Nick, was not so lucky. He was sentenced to life without parole for first-degree murder.
He should get out.
I mean, I don't know. He knew what he was doing.
He should be in prison, but according to me, he should get out.
Dana's Law.
Dana's Law sounds like murdered girls law, Dana's Law.
Megan's Law.
Dana's Law. So while in prison, Gypsy got engaged to a guy named Ken. And at the time, they had known each other for a year and a half and started dating after meeting as pen pals. They called off their engagement, but then got back together.
She really loves writing to people long distance, Seems to work really
That
well.
Virgo
for her.
Mercury has so much to say,
Yeah, but it turns out that her and Ken weren't really back together because Gypsy during this time married another guy whose name was Ryan Scott Anderson, and he was a Louisiana middle school special ed teacher.
She's not letting life set her Libra Rising back in terms of being a player. She's like,
I know.
Hell yeah.
But remember, Gypsy didn't really have any education. She was homeschooled her whole life by a crazy woman.
I guess fan fiction can maybe get you further than we think.
It's true. But Gypsy had a 10-year prison sentence. She was released early, so she served about 85% of her sentence because she spent time in jail prior to her conviction, which counted towards her sentence. So what was going on when Gypsy was finally released?
She was released on December 28th, 2023 at 3:30 a.m. in Chillicothe, Missouri. And this was during a full moon in Cancer. So the sun is in Capricorn, the moon is in Cancer, and there's a Scorpio rising. So this is 2 days after an exact full moon in Cancer, which was conjunct Gypsy's midheaven and south node. So this is simultaneous endings and beginnings, and it's a public release and public attention in of course, the public part of her chart. And it's 2 days before Jupiter stationed direct in Gypsy's 8th house. So remember, 8th house synastry with her mom was about, being able to trust. And this begins her story of learning to trust herself. And Uranus is in Taurus, square Gypsy's Jupiter in Leo. So this is surprising strokes of luck and attention and potential opportunities to make money, which I hope she's been able to cash in on. Gypsy's also in a 9th house Gemini year, and Mercury was retrograde in Sagittarius conjunct Mars. So this year's about expanding her worldview, which isn't hard when her world was kept so contained for so long, of course. But also everything can feel brand new, especially with that transiting Mercury retrograde conjunct Mars in Sagittarius. It can just be really unbridled optimism, right? And then the North Node is conjunct Gypsy's lot of fortune. And so the lot of fortune shows fated events beyond one's control. And the North Node, your lot in life is literally from the lot of fortune. Astrology. And so, so the North Node pulls her toward that fate of finally being able to experience freedom. It's also the final Jupiter square. So it's the last ditch effort since she had her mother murdered on her Jupiter return, and then her next Jupiter return will be in another 3 or 4 years. So then she'll be settled into being a free woman.
Wow.
Gypsy. So
Gypsy.
after she was released, she got real big on social media. I feel like her Instagram account blew up, her TikTok blew up. She honestly became popular because she said her husband gave fire dick. So, I mean, chic for her. But sadly, their relationship did not last, and they announced their divorce. So, Dana, what was going on when that happened?
Official divorce announcement was March 28th, 2024, which was just 3 days after a lunar eclipse in Libra conjunct Gypsy's ascendant. Woo! And so eclipses in the 1st and 7th house often reflect major events in relationships, including marriage and divorce. And for Gypsy, it was both, getting after it. It was also 4 days before Mercury stationed retrograde in her 7th house of marriage. And so this is reconsidering promises made in relationships, especially those that are binding contracts. Pluto's also conjunct her natal Saturn in Aquarius in her 5th house. And so this is transforming her ideas around and definition of commitment, how she experiences that for herself. Saturn is commitment. And 5th house is both fun and sex. So she got the fire dick and then she got right out. And Venus, Mars, and Saturn were in Pisces opposite her natal Mercury, Venus, and Mars. So it's a Venus opposition and a Mars opposition, plus Saturn opposing those placements. Both Venus and Mars oppositions can show times when it will be necessary to compromise in relationships. And when we couple the opposition with Saturn also opposing her natal Venus and Mars, it's like a full stop, just an ending to that story. And then Venus stationed retrograde in Leo 4 days before her solar return last summer in 2023. So Venus retrograde in the solar return can show a year when our relationships will be tenuous or just the nature of them will change. And solar eclipse, there's a solar eclipse in Aries conjunct Gypsy's part of fortune in her 7th house on April 8th. And this is sort of, a destiny to divorce, or her destiny was to divorce. An eclipse conjunct the part of fortune is not a destiny to divorce, but it was her destiny to divorce because her lot of fortune is in her 7th house. And so Jupiter is also conjunct Uranus, square her natal Jupiter in Leo. So her Jupiter in Taurus is conjunct Uranus in her 8th house of trust and shared finances. And the Jupiter square is freeing her up for new opportunities and teaching her again to trust herself and maybe want to, go out on her own. Also, when we combine this with Uranus, she'll surprise herself and just life will feel surprising. And I saw her smoking a cigarette with some new guy outside a gas station somewhere. She's really sort of embodying the Lana lore.
You saw a picture of that, or you saw her doing that?
I was there.
I was like, where? I need to know about this, Dana.
No, I wasn't there, sadly. But I saw a photo online of her just in a cig. I was like, sweet.
Ripping cigs with a new man already. I mean, let this woman live.
Truly. So Gypsy obviously has had a very wild ride in life so far. But Dana, what do you think she has coming up for her next?
So looking at her solar return transits, she'll be in a 10th house Cancer year, and the moon will be her time lord. The 10th house is about career, and especially for public figures, it will be about publicity. She may come to terms with how she wants to appear in public and sort of handle her branding. Also in her solar return, Jupiter is trine her natal moon, which once again is her lord of the year. So this indicates that it can be a smooth and or forgiving transition. So she could expect some grace, and I hope that is how it turns out. Mercury, it's also her Mercury return during her solar return, so she's really connecting the dots here. And again, she has a really strong Mercury, so she's probably going to put things together really quickly. And that could be tough, of course, but she has the chops to do it with the natal Mercury and Virgo. Venus is also conjunct her natal Jupiter, so this could be about grace or star power. It's in her 11th house of audience, so she can really endear herself to people, or she can continue to endear herself to people, I should say. Pluto is also opposite her natal Chiron, so this will be tougher. This is trials and tribulations. She could really reveal more information about her childhood and her literal experience as opposed to just facts. Or it can be a more internal process, but because her natal Chiron is in her 11th house, I do think sharing her story will probably be cathartic and part of her growing process. The nodes are also conjunct her ascendant and descendant, like exactly from August 29th through November 5th, 2024, because the nodes hang out at the 6th degree. So that's going to be, if anyone has a placement at 6 degrees of Aries or Libra, mark those dates down. Again, it's August 29th through November 5th. So the solar eclipse in Libra on October 2nd is also conjunct her natal ascendant. So the nodes, again, are exactly conjunct her ascendant and descendant axis, and this will be really intense for her and her relationships. If we remember that her mom's Saturn was also conjunct her natal descendant, this means we're coming up to the nodal opposition of her mother's death. So she'll be coming to terms with her fate and living in the world without her mother's influence, which was so strong for so long. Mars is also conjunct her south node at the solar eclipse, which, I mean, it could be memories ripping through. Hopefully it's nothing too aggressive. But then Mars is retrograde next winter. So Mars stations retrograde on her natal sun in Leo and stations direct on her natal south node in Cancer. And that retrograde is from December 6, 2024 through February 23rd, 2025. And this could be a hit piece or someone trying to take her down in public. Or it could be also her just, Mars can be having to handle a lot. So it could be over scheduling herself and then all of a sudden sort of having to really deal with maybe having a public life or going back, deciding how she wants that to look. And then 6 days after Mars stations direct, Venus stations retrograde on her natal descendant in Aries in her 7th house. And so this could extend the story from her nodes on her natal ascendant and descendant axis. And that's March 1st through April 12th. And so it's a softer transit than the Mars retrograde, but it still could be her connecting with someone from the past. Maybe she'll talk about her romance with Nick. Also, she has some progressions that are significant. Progressed Chiron squares her progressed ascendant on July 9th, 2024. So this can be experiencing pain or realizing that she has a talent for something. And her progressed moon enters Taurus, which is her natal 8th house on October 22nd, 2024. So the moon loves to be in Taurus. But again, it's that 8th house, which is so sensitive. This can be a time when she's learning to trust herself, and maybe even a time when she, like a very personal but literal experience would be if she does something and then is reminded of her mother. And then she's like, all right, I don't want to be that way. But she has a lot coming up and I wish her well.
And she's going to get a reality show.
Hope to God. Although I don't even watch reality TV. For her Leo self, I think that could be good for her. And in terms of what's healthiest for this person, I think attention is what she needs and deserves. Would like for her to continue to be a gay icon. She's not gay, but she's a gay icon. At least in terms of like
Really?
the
I didn't know that.
gay media, which the only stuff I consume.
So the gays
Yeah.
love Gypsy. She should just do a lot of club
That'd be so cool.
appearances.
With different wigs.
Yeah, I bet.
She's probably traumatized
maybe,
from
yeah.
wigs, Dana.
Oh yeah, I bet she's like unhinged when she drinks. I bet she's wild.
Oh
I
my
want her
God.
and
Well,
the
we'll
Jersey
keep in
Shore
mind.
cast to somehow unify.
Yeah, I'm
Oh my
sure
God.
we're in for a book deal. We're in for a reality show. We're in for another documentary. Who knows? But basically, we have not seen or heard the last from our girl Gypsy.
No, ma'am.
Even if she just wants to come out with merch,
No,
that would
ma'am.
be good. Gypsy, if you hear us, do merch.
Gypsy, if you hear us, do merch.
what did it
It
say?
could just say her
if she
name
did
and then
merch?
her smoking that cigarette, like with a simple print of that. That'd be so cool.
Something about
Yeah.
Fire D.
Just like a picture of the
Yeah.
tweet or whatever it was.
Yeah. Whew. Well, we're so happy to be back with you guys in season 7, and we've got a lot more coming up, and we're really excited. And if you have anything you want us to cover this season, DM us, email us. We love hearing from you guys. So don't forget to sign up for our Patreon for $5 a month, and you can get that extra chart about Gypsy Rose and her boyfriend, Nick. And with that,
I'm
I'm
Dana.
Elise,
I'm Sarah.
and this is Allegedly Astrology.
Bye.
Listen to the wind blow. Watch the sunrise.
Wow.